So anytime Donald Trump holds a rally, I know I'm going to be busy the next day because I know he's going to give me a fountain of content I could make based off the crazy, unhinged things that he says. As of late, he's been out there playing his hits a lot. He does this whole bit about Hannibal Lecter. He'll do the bit about his uncle at MIT and the battery and the shark. And he always loves to start off by going, and the media loves when I talk about this, they say I'm crazy. And then he goes off on his bit. He's got this really weird bit now that he does where he, oh, baby, or whatever the hell that is. And so for the longest time there, he was just going out there and playing his hits over and over. And then Joe Biden dropped out of the race. And Vice President Kamala Harris came forward like a lightning bolt. Suddenly, prominent people started endorsing her. Mike Pence hasn't officially endorsed Kamala, but he's laid out reasons why he won't be endorsing Trump. And so Trump is now in full-blown panic mode. And while he may be out there still playing those hits, he's in panic mode now, and he's actually begging the voters to vote for him. But what he says in this next clip should disturb any reasonable person. Because what he says to them is, you just got to vote one more time. After that, we'll have it fixed to where you won't ever have to do it again. He really said it, folks. Take a look.
And Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
Now, before we talk about just how dangerous that statement truly is, I want to talk about the one thing that a lot of people are saying, which is that it sounded like he said, I'm not a Christian. It sounded like he said it. I really believe that he had a hesitation there. I actually believe he was about to say I'm not a Christian, and he corrected at the last minute. It was kind of like, I'm a Christian. It sort of like slipped out that way. I believe he was about to say, I'm not one, but go ahead and vote for me. I believe he had a slip of the tongue moment and corrected at the last second. That's my take on it. But the most dangerous part about this whole speech, folks, is he's saying out loud, if you'll just vote for me this time, you don't ever have to worry about it again. You'll never have to vote again. Now, what have we been sitting here warning people about this entire time? We've been talking and pointing out, folks, he said he wants to be a dictator on day one. He said he wants to terminate the Constitution. He's called us the enemy of the people. Said he wants to root us out like vermin. We've sat and told and pointed out all the things that he said. And people have been saying to us, he don't really mean it. He wouldn't never do those things. You guys are just being hyperbolic. There he is saying out loud, you'll never have to worry about voting again because we'll fix it. That should absolutely alarm anybody out there. If that's not a gigantic red flag, folks, I don't know what else is. But that right there really got me to thinking long and hard about a whole lot of things. And one thing I'll say is that, I talk a lot about the influences I've had on the channel here. I've talked about Hunter S. Thompson and how he was a huge influence on me politically, and songwriters and musicians that influenced me politically. One person who had a massive influence on my life, though, was my grandfather on my mother's side. And he was a lifelong Republican, and he was a Christian. But he was also a history buff. He was a World War II vet. He taught me so much in such a short period of time. I looked up to him so much and wanted to be him so bad that I went out of my way to learn every president just so I could quote them to him. I would go in his room and say, hey, Pap, listen, and I would start with George Washington, and I would go all the way to Ronald Reagan, and I was so proud of myself that I could do it. Well, then he said to me, okay, can you figure out what states they were from? Learn that next, and we did. And I looked up to him so much that I went out of my way to learn and study American history and understand who we were. And because he went and fought in World War II and fought on the side of democracy and fought against dictators, I studied that. I was the kid in school that on his lunch break would go to the library and sit and read books. And I actually got called into the office because of some of the books I was reading. People was like, why are you checking these out? Why are you digging into these? That's because I want to understand how we got here. I want to understand how we got to this particular point. I want to understand how these dictators got control over a people, because it doesn't make sense to me that people would fall for something like this. So I studied the dictators. I studied about Hitler. I studied different people. And I did so because I looked up to my grandfather so much, and I wanted to learn about where we came from, and I wanted to learn these things so we would never go there again. I was a strong believer in the phrase, those that don't study history are doomed to repeat it. But I'm also a believer these days that those that want history erased intend to repeat it. And that's why that I sit down in this chair every day and talk about Donald Trump and point out the things that I see. And to me, folks, this has got nothing to do with Democrat versus Republican. It's got nothing to do with conservative versus liberal. And I really believe if my grandpa was here today to have this conversation with me, he would say the same thing. I promise you, if we'd have been sitting watching a debate, back in 1988, and let's say George H.W. Bush had stood up and said, yeah, I don't mind being dictator on day one, I promise you, my grandfather would have pumped the brakes and said, wait a minute, whoa, that's not what we are. Hold up. And that's what more people needs to say. Everybody's so caught up in the WWE circus, they're not paying attention to what we're trying to point out. But folks, if that right there isn't a red flag and that doesn't alarm you, I really don't know of anything else that would.